The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 in the morning like it did every single day. Elena rolled over and hit the snooze button, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Just 5 more minutes, she thought. But those 5 minutes never felt like enough. They never would be. She dragged herself out of bed and walked to the tiny bathroom of her cramped apartment. The mirror showed a tired face staring back at her. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of too many late nights and not enough rest. At 28 years old, she shouldn't look this exhausted. But life had a way of aging people faster than time ever could. Elena splashed cold water on her face, hoping it would wake her up. Through the thin walls, she could hear her neighbor's television already blaring the morning news. She could also hear her father coughing in the next room. That cough had become a familiar sound over the past 5 years. Some mornings it was better. Some mornings it was worse. Today seemed like a worse day. She walked to his room and gently pushed the door open. Her father was sitting up in bed trying to catch his breath between coughs. His medication bottles lined the nightstand like little soldiers, each one representing another bill, another shift she'd have to work, another piece of her dreams slipping away. Morning. "Papa," she said softly, helping him take his morning pills. "How are you feeling today?" He managed a weak smile. "Better now that I see your face, mija." It was the same thing he said every morning. Even when he could barely breathe, even when the pain was clearly written across his face, he always tried to make her feel better. That's just who he was, a good man who'd worked his whole life as a construction worker, who'd never missed a day at her school recitals, who'd saved every penny to support her music education. And now here he was, unable to work, depending on her for everything. Elena made him breakfast. Nothing fancy, just oatmeal and toast. It was all they could afford, and more importantly, all his stomach could handle these days. She watched him eat slowly, each spoonful an effort. The medical bills had piled up so fast after his diagnosis. One day he was fine working on a building site downtown. The next day he collapsed, unable to breathe. The doctors said it was his lungs, damaged from years of breathing and dust and chemicals on construction sites. They said he'd need treatment for the rest of his life. That was 5 years ago. 5 years since Elena had to make the hardest decision of her life. She remembered that phone call like it was yesterday. She'd been at Juilliard, one of the best music schools in the world. She'd earned a full scholarship, something that almost never happened. Her piano professor had called her a prodigy. She was preparing for a major recital that could launch her career. Everything she'd worked for since she was 6 years old was finally coming together. Then her mother called. Her father was in the hospital. The bills were already starting. Someone needed to come home. Elena had stared at her dorm room that night, at the posters of famous pianists on her walls, at the sheet music scattered across her desk. She'd looked at her hands, the hands that her first piano teacher said were born to play. She'd cried until there were no tears left. Then she'd packed her bags and bought a bus ticket home. "You should go," her father had said when she arrived at the hospital. "Go back to school. I'll be fine." But they both knew that wasn't true. Her mother worked 2 jobs already and could barely keep up. They needed help. They needed money. And Elena was their only child, so she'd stayed. She'd called the school and withdrawn. She'd watched her scholarship disappear. She'd put away her dreams and started looking for work. That's how she ended up at the Belmont Hotel. It was the fanciest place in the city, the kind of place where movie stars stayed when they were in town, where business deals worth millions happened over lunch. The pay was decent, and if you worked enough shifts, you could almost keep up with the bills. Almost. Elena finished getting ready for work. She put on her black pants and white button-up shirt, the standard uniform for the serving staff. She tied her dark hair back into a neat bun. She looked at herself in the mirror one more time. The girl staring back looked nothing like the young woman who used to perform on stage, wearing elegant dresses, her hair styled perfectly, her eyes bright with excitement. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "I'll be home late tonight, Papa," she called out. "Mrs. Chen from next door will check on you at lunch." "Work hard, mija," he called back. But not too hard. The bus ride to the hotel took 40 minutes. Elena used the time to prepare herself mentally for the day ahead. She'd be on her feet for the next 10 hours, maybe 12 if they needed her to stay late. She'd smile at wealthy guests who probably spent more on one meal than she made in a week. She'd clear plates and refill wine glasses and pretend that everything was fine. The Belmont Hotel rose up like a castle made of glass and marble. Elena entered through the staff entrance in the back, changing into her uniform in the cramped locker room. Around her, other servers and housekeepers were getting ready for their shifts. Some were chatting and laughing. Others, like Elena, just looked tired. She clocked in and headed to the main ballroom where they'd be setting up for lunch service. But she took a small detour, like she did most mornings when she had a few extra minutes. She walked through the grand ballroom where events were held. There, sitting on a raised platform in the center of the room, was the piano. A beautiful Steinway grand piano, black and glossy, worth more than Elena would make in 10 years of working at the hotel. She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then walked over to it. Her fingers traced the smooth wood of the case. She lifted the key cover slowly, like she was opening a treasure chest. The keys were perfect, bright white and deep black, arranged in the pattern she'd known since childhood. Elena glanced at the door one more time, then sat down on the bench. Her hands hovered over the keys for a moment. Then she began to play very softly so no one would hear. It was just a simple scale at first, then a few chords. Then, before she could stop herself, she was playing a piece by Chopin that she'd learned years ago. Her fingers remembered every note, every subtle change in tempo, every place where the music swelled with emotion. For those few minutes, she wasn't a waitress. She wasn't drowning in bills. She wasn't watching her father slowly fade away. She was just a musician doing what she was born to do. "Elena, we need you in the kitchen." The voice shattered the moment. Elena's hands froze above the keys. She quickly closed the cover and stood up, smoothing her uniform. Her supervisor was standing in the doorway, looking impatient. "Sorry," Elena mumbled, hurrying past her. "I was just get to work," the supervisor said, not unkindly. "We've got a busy day ahead." Elena nodded and rushed to the kitchen, the echo of the piano's notes still ringing in her ears. That was her life now, stolen moments with a piano she'd never own, playing music no one would ever hear, dreams that lived only in the spaces between shifts, in the quiet seconds before sleep, in the part of her heart she kept carefully locked away. But she kept going. Because that's what you do when people depend on you. You keep going, even when every step feels impossible. You keep going even when you can't see the road ahead. You keep going because giving up isn't an option when someone you love needs you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, life finds a way to surprise you. Sometimes opportunity knocks when you least expect it. Sometimes the universe has plans you never could have imagined. For Elena, that moment was coming soon. She just didn't know it yet. 3 weeks later, Elena was wiping down tables in the main dining room when her supervisor approached her with a clipboard. The woman looked stressed more than usual. Her hair was coming loose from her normally perfect bun, and she kept tapping her pen against the clipboard nervously. "Elena, I need you on the evening shift tonight," she said. "I know it's your day off, but we're short-staffed and we have a huge event." The annual charity gala. Elena's heart sank. She'd promised her father she'd spend the evening with him. They were going to watch old movies together, something they hadn't done in months. But she also knew what the answer had to be. She needed the extra money. Her father's medication costs had gone up again last week. "Okay," she said quietly. "What time?" "Be here at 5. "And Elena?" Her supervisor's expression softened slightly. "Wear your best uniform. This is the biggest event of the year. We're talking mayors, celebrities, business executives. Everyone who's anyone will be here. The hotel's reputation is on the line." That evening, Elena arrived at the hotel to find it transformed. The lobby sparkled with fresh flowers and crystal decorations. Red carpet had been rolled out at the entrance. Men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns were already arriving, stepping out of limousines and luxury cars. Camera flashes went off as photographers captured the arrivals. Elena changed into her uniform and joined the other servers in the kitchen. The head chef was barking orders, his face red from the heat and stress. Plates of fancy appetizers lined the counters, each one looking like a tiny work of art. Elena had no idea what half of them were. Caviar, foie gras, things with French names she couldn't pronounce. "Listen up, everyone," the event coordinator called out, clapping her hands for attention. She was a tall woman in a sleek black dress, wearing a headset like she was running a military operation. "This gala raises money for children's hospitals. We have 200 guests, each paying $10,000 a plate. Everything must be perfect. Absolutely perfect. The evening's schedule is tight. Cocktail hour, then dinner, then our featured performer will play piano during dessert. Any questions? No one dared ask any questions. Elena picked up a tray of champagne glasses and headed into the ballroom. She'd seen fancy events before, but nothing like this. The room looked like something from a fairy tale. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over everything. The tables were decorated with white roses and gold accents. A stage had been set up at one end of the room, with the Steinway grand piano positioned in the center, a spotlight already aimed at it. As Elena moved through the crowd offering champagne, she couldn't help but listen to the conversations around her. People talked about their vacation homes, their private jets, their latest business deals. A woman with diamonds dripping from her neck complained that her contractor was 3 days late finishing her pool house. A man in an expensive suit bragged about the sports car he'd just bought for his son's 16th birthday. Elena kept her face neutral and her smile polite. This was another world, one she'd never belonged to, but she couldn't help feeling a tiny bit bitter. Just one of those diamond necklaces could pay for her father's treatment for a year. Just one of those sports cars could change their entire lives. "Excuse me, miss," an older gentleman called out. "Could I get some water instead?" "Of course, sir," Elena said, grateful for the interruption to her thoughts. She headed back to the kitchen. That's when she heard the commotion. The event coordinator was nearly shouting into her headset, her face pale. "What do you mean he can't perform?" "He has to perform. This is a $10,000 per plate event." Elena slowed down, trying not to obviously eavesdrop but unable to help overhearing. "Food poisoning?" the coordinator said, her voice rising. "How is that even possible? He ate at a 5-star restaurant." She listened for a moment, then covered her face with her hands. "This is a disaster. An absolute disaster." The hotel manager rushed over, his expression panicked. "What's going on?" "It's Viktor Petrov," the coordinator said, naming the famous pianist who was supposed to perform. "He's violently ill. His manager says there's no way he can play tonight. He can barely stand up." The manager's face went white. "We need a replacement now. Can we get someone else?" "At 7 o'clock on a Friday night. Every professional pianist in the city is already booked or performing somewhere else. I've already made 5 calls. There's no one available." Elena stood frozen, still holding her empty tray. She watched as the coordinator and manager went back and forth, getting more desperate by the minute. The guests were already being seated for dinner. In less than an hour, someone was supposed to be playing that piano. "What if we just play recorded music?" the manager suggested. "Absolutely not," the coordinator snapped. "We advertised a live performance by Viktor Petrov. These people paid good money. If we don't deliver something close to what we promised, the hotel's reputation will be ruined. Not to mention the charity will suffer." Elena's hands started to shake. She knew she should walk away, go back to serving drinks, mind her own business. But her feet wouldn't move. She kept staring at that piano on the stage, sitting there under the spotlight, waiting for someone to play it. The coordinator was almost in tears now. "I don't know what to do. I've never had something like this happen. Never." That's when the hotel manager's eyes landed on Elena. She saw his expression change, saw the moment of recognition. He'd caught her playing the piano a few months ago during her break. She'd been mortified, certain she was about to get fired for touching expensive hotel property, but he'd just smiled and told her she played beautifully. "You," he said, walking toward Elena. "You play piano, don't you?" Elena's mouth went dry. Every eye in the kitchen suddenly turned to look at her. I used to," she stammered, "but I haven't performed in years. I just mess around sometimes. I'm not—" "Can you play well enough for tonight?" the manager interrupted. His eyes were desperate. "Please. I know this is asking a lot, but we're in serious trouble here." Elena's mind raced. Perform? In front of 200 wealthy people? In her server uniform? She hadn't played for an audience since her Juilliard days. What if she messed up? What if her fingers froze? What if people laughed at her? "I don't think that's a good idea," the coordinator said, looking Elena up and down skeptically. "No offense, but Viktor Petrov is world-renowned. These guests are expecting a certain caliber of performance. Do we have any other options?" The manager shot back. Then he turned to Elena again. "Please, I heard you play. You're talented, really talented. I know you can do this." Elena thought about her father at home, probably wondering where she was. She thought about all the times she'd dreamed of performing again, of feeling that rush of playing for a crowd. She thought about how terrified she was, how completely unprepared she felt. But she also thought about the opportunity. When would she ever get another chance like this? When would she ever sit at that piano with people actually listening? "I'm in my work uniform," she said weakly. "I look like a server." "We'll figure that out," the manager said quickly. "Can you do it? Yes or no?" Elena took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was crazy. This was absolutely insane. Every logical part of her brain was screaming at her to say no. "What would I play?" she heard herself ask. The manager's face lit up with hope. "Whatever you want. Whatever you know best. Just fill the time during dessert service. 20, maybe 30 minutes, 20 minutes. Elena ran through her mental catalog of pieces she remembered. Chopin, Beethoven, some Debussy, and that piece she'd written herself years ago, the one inspired by her father's illness. She'd never performed that one for anyone. She'd written it late at night when emotions were running high and sleep wouldn't come. The coordinator was still shaking her head. "This is a terrible idea. If she embarrasses us, she won't," the manager said firmly. He looked at Elena with an expression that was part desperation, part genuine faith. "Will you?" Elena thought about all those mornings sneaking over to the piano, all those stolen moments when she pretended just for a few minutes that she was still the person she used to be, all those dreams she'd locked away telling herself they were gone forever. Maybe they weren't gone. Maybe they were just waiting. "Okay," she whispered. Then louder, "Okay, I'll do it." The kitchen erupted in a flurry of activity. The coordinator, despite her doubts, switched into action mode. Someone ran to find Elena something better to wear. Someone else rushed to tell the technical crew about the change. The chef sent someone to get Elena some water and told her to take a few minutes to breathe and prepare. Elena walked toward the ballroom, her legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. Through the doorway, she could see the guests seated at their elegant tables, talking and laughing, completely unaware that their evening's entertainment had just changed from a world-famous performer to a waitress who hadn't played publicly in 5 years. She looked at the piano waiting on stage. The spotlight made it glow. In less than an hour, she'd be sitting there, in front of all those people, playing music that came from somewhere deep in her soul, from a part of her she'd tried so hard to bury. Elena wasn't sure if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life or if something amazing was about to happen. Maybe both. Probably both, but one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same after tonight. Elena sat in a small room backstage, her hands trembling in her lap. Someone had found her a simple black dress. Nothing fancy, but at least it wasn't her server uniform. It fit okay, though it was a bit loose in the shoulders. Another staff member had helped her fix her hair, pulling it into a more elegant style. When Elena looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself but her hands. She couldn't stop staring at her hands. These weren't the hands of a concert pianist anymore. They were rough from carrying heavy trays. Her nails were short and practical, not long and polished like they used to be. There was a small burn scar on her left thumb from a hot plate last month. Would people notice? Would they judge her before she even played a single note? 5 minutes. Someone called through the door. 5 minutes. Elena closed her eyes and tried to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like her old piano teacher had taught her. But her chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing it. What was she thinking? She couldn't do this. She should run out there right now and tell them she'd made a mistake. The door opened and the hotel manager peeked in. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Elena admitted. There was no point in lying. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Listen, I know this is scary, but I heard you play that morning a few months ago. You were incredible. You have real talent, the kind that doesn't just disappear because you took a break." "A 5-year break," Elena said. "I haven't performed for an audience since I was at Juilliard. And I had to leave before I even finished my first year." "Why did you leave?" he asked gently. Elena hadn't talked about this with anyone at work. She kept her personal life separate, always professional, always private. But something about this moment made the words spill out. "My father got sick. Really sick. The medical bills were crushing my family. Someone had to help, and I was the only one who could. So I left school and got a job. I've been working ever since." The manager was quiet for a moment. "That's one of the most selfless things I've ever heard. You gave up your dream for your family. Some days I regret it," Elena said honestly. "Some days I'm angry at the whole situation. But most days I just miss it." I miss playing. I miss feeling like music was my whole world. Then tonight, the manager said, "Don't play for those people out there. Don't play for the charity or the hotel or anyone else. Play for yourself. Play for that girl who had to give up Juilliard. Play for your father. Play because you love music and you've earned this moment." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. If she started crying now, she'd ruin her makeup and she wouldn't be able to stop. "Thank you," she whispered. 2 minutes, the voice called again. This was it. Elena stood up, smoothed down her borrowed dress, and walked toward the stage entrance. She could hear the crowd on the other side of the curtain. The dinner service was finishing up. Servers were clearing plates and bringing out desserts. Soon the lights would dim and someone would introduce her. Except they wouldn't introduce Elena the waitress. They'd introduce her as an emerging talent or something equally vague. The event coordinator had decided it was better not to mention that she worked at the hotel. Let people think what they wanted to think. Elena waited in the wings, her heart hammering. She could see the piano from here, sitting in that pool of light. It looked so far away, like she'd have to walk a mile to reach it. She watched one of her co-workers, a girl named Rita who she ate lunch with sometimes, serving dessert to a table near the front. Rita looked up and caught her eye. Her friend's face showed complete shock, but then she smiled and gave Elena a subtle thumbs up. That small gesture somehow helped. At least someone out there was rooting for her. The event coordinator walked onto the stage. She was all smiles now, completely professional, though Elena had seen her panicking just an hour ago. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a slight change to this evening's program. Due to an unexpected illness, Viktor Petrov is unable to join us tonight." A murmur went through the crowd. Elena heard someone groan in disappointment. "However," the coordinator continued, her voice bright and confident, "we are fortunate to have secured a remarkable young performer to take his place. Please welcome to the stage a pianist of extraordinary talent." That was Elena's cue. She stepped out from behind the curtain and into the light. The walk to the piano felt like it happened in slow motion. She was aware of everything, the way her borrowed shoes clicked on the hardwood floor, the confused whispers from the audience, the way some people were leaning forward to get a better look at her, probably wondering who she was. She caught sight of a woman in a fur stole leaning over to whisper something to her companion, and they both looked skeptical. Elena reached the piano bench and sat down. The seat was familiar, the same one she'd sat on during those stolen morning moments. But everything else felt different. The lights were hot on her face. The silence of 200 people waiting was deafening. She could feel their doubt, their disappointment that they weren't getting the famous performer they'd been promised. Her hands hovered over the keys. For a terrifying second, her mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember what piece she'd planned to play first. She couldn't remember anything. Panic started to rise in her chest. Then she looked down at the keys, those familiar black and white patterns, and something inside her settled. This was a piano. Just a piano. The same instrument she'd been playing since she was 6 years old. The same instrument that had been her best friend, her therapy, her escape for most of her life. Elena took a breath and began to play. She'd chosen Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, the same piece she'd prepared for her Juilliard audition all those years ago. The first notes floated out into the ballroom, soft and gentle. The whispers stopped immediately. People who'd been reaching for their dessert forks paused mid-reach. Elena closed her eyes and let herself fall into the music. This piece had always felt like a conversation to her, like the piano was telling a story. It started quietly, almost shyly, like someone sharing a secret. Then it grew, became more confident, more passionate. Her fingers moved across the keys, remembering patterns they'd practiced thousands of times. But something was different this time. When she'd played this piece as a student, she'd played it technically well. She'd hit all the right notes, followed all the tempo markings, did everything her teacher had instructed. But now, after 5 years of struggle and sacrifice, after watching her father suffer, after giving up everything she'd worked for, the music meant something more. Every note carried weight. Every phrase told a story. This wasn't just a pretty song anymore. It was pain and loss and love and hope all mixed together. It was early morning bus rides and double shifts and medical bills. It was stolen moments at this very piano, pretending her life was different. It was the sound of everything she'd been holding inside for 5 long years, finally breaking free. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Even the servers had stopped moving. Elena was so lost in the music that she didn't notice. She didn't see the way people's expressions had changed from skeptical to captivated. She didn't see a man in a tuxedo near the back slowly lower his wine glass, his mouth slightly open. She didn't see a woman with tears already forming in her eyes. As the nocturne reached its emotional peak, Elena's whole body swayed with the music. Her hands flew across the keys with a confidence that surprised even her. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was just feeling, just playing, just being the musician she was always meant to be. The piece ended softly, the way it had begun, like a whisper fading into silence. Elena held the final note, letting it ring out until it disappeared completely. Only then did she open her eyes. The silence that followed felt eternal. Elena's heart sank. Had she messed up? Had they hated it? She started to stand, ready to apologize and run off stage. Then the applause started, but it wasn't polite, scattered clapping. It was thunderous. People weren't just clapping, they were standing up. A standing ovation, and she'd only played one piece. Elena sat frozen on the bench, stunned. She saw faces in the crowd, and they looked different than before. The skepticism was gone. Instead, people looked moved. Some were wiping their eyes. Others were clapping so hard their hands must have hurt. But Elena knew she wasn't done. The coordinator had asked for 20 to 30 minutes. She'd only played one piece. She glanced toward the wings where the manager stood. He was clapping too, and when their eyes met, he nodded encouragingly. "Keep going," his expression said. "Give them more." Elena turned back to the piano. She didn't need to think about what to play next. Her hands already knew. She launched into a Beethoven sonata, one that was fast and passionate, full of fire and energy. After the emotional weight of the Chopin, this felt like release, like breaking free from chains. The crowd settled back into their seats, but they weren't eating their desserts anymore. They were watching her, really watching. Elena felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. She felt alive. She felt like herself. Not Elena the waitress, not Elena the caretaker, not Elena the girl who gave up her dreams, just Elena the pianist, Elena the musician. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. She played like her life depended on it because in a way, maybe it did. This moment, this performance, it was proof that she still existed. That the girl who'd loved music with her whole heart hadn't disappeared completely. She'd just been waiting, buried under bills and responsibilities and exhaustion, waiting for a chance to emerge again. As her fingers danced across the keys, Elena finally understood what her old teacher used to say. "Music isn't about perfection," she'd tell her. "It's about truth. It's about taking what's in your heart and making it heard." Tonight, Elena's heart was being heard, and it was singing. After the Beethoven, Elena paused for just a moment. Her hands were actually trembling now, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the pure rush of performing again. She could feel the energy in the room, the way everyone was leaning forward, waiting to see what she'd play next. She hadn't planned this part. The Chopin and Beethoven were pieces she'd rehearsed 1,000,000 times in her life. Safe choices, pieces any trained pianist would know. But now, sitting there with 200 people hanging on her every note, Elena felt something shift inside her. She thought about her father, about those nights after his diagnosis when she couldn't sleep, when the fear and worry were so overwhelming that the only thing that helped was sitting at their old keyboard at home, the cheap electric one with keys that stuck sometimes. She'd composed a piece during those dark nights. She'd never written it down properly, never played it for anyone. It just lived in her head and her heart, a melody born from grief and love and desperation. Before she could second-guess herself, Elena began to play it. The piece started slow and haunting. It wasn't like the classical compositions she'd played before. This was raw, personal. The melody wandered like someone lost in the dark, searching for light. Her left hand created a deep, steady heartbeat in the bass notes while her right hand wove the story above it. She didn't notice the way the entire room had gone still, didn't see the woman in the front row whose hand had moved to cover her mouth, didn't see the CEO of a major company blinking rapidly, trying to hold back tears. Didn't see Rita, her coworker, standing frozen by a dessert cart with tears streaming down her face. The music built slowly, adding layers of complexity. Elena's foot worked the pedals, letting the notes blend together into something that sounded almost like voices, like people calling out to each other, like a family trying to stay together through a storm. There was a moment in the piece about halfway through where everything stopped. Just one hand playing single notes, each one hanging in the air before the next one came. It was the sound of isolation, of being alone with your fear. Elena had written this part on the night she'd decided to leave Juilliard, when she'd sat in her dorm room and realized her whole life was about to change. Then both hands came back together, and the melody transformed. It was still sad, but there was something else in it now. Determination, strength. The music said what Elena had never been able to put into words. Yes, life broke my heart. Yes, I lost everything I thought I wanted, but I'm still here. I'm still fighting. I'm still capable of creating something beautiful. A man in the back of the room, a music critic for the city's biggest newspaper, sat with his pen forgotten in his hand. He'd been to hundreds of concerts in his career. He'd heard the world's best pianists perform in the finest concert halls, but he couldn't remember the last time music had made him feel something this deeply. This wasn't just technical skill. This was a human soul speaking directly to other human souls. The piece reached its climax and Elena's hands were moving faster now, the emotions pouring out. Every bill she couldn't pay. Every time she'd had to smile at hotel guests while her feet ached and her heart broke. Every morning she'd watched her father struggle to breathe. Every dream she'd buried. It all came out through the piano, transformed into something that somehow made sense of the senselessness. Then, like a storm passing, the music began to calm. The melody from the beginning returned, but it sounded different now. More peaceful, accepting. The last notes fell like gentle rain, each one softer than the last, until finally there was silence. Elena sat completely still, her hands resting on the keys. She was breathing hard, emotionally exhausted. For a moment she'd forgotten where she was. She'd been somewhere else entirely, somewhere deep inside herself that she rarely let anyone see. The silence stretched on. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Elena started to panic. Had she made a horrible mistake? Had playing her own composition been too weird, too personal, too much? Then she heard it. Someone was crying. Actually crying, not trying to hide it. Elena looked up and was shocked to see that it wasn't just one person. All around the room, people were wiping their eyes. Some were crying openly. Others were just sitting there looking stunned, like they'd been hit by something they didn't see coming. The applause started slowly this time. One person, then another, then suddenly everyone was standing again. But this ovation felt different than the first one. People weren't just clapping. Some had their hands pressed to their hearts. Others were holding on to each other. An older woman in an elegant gown was hugging her husband, both of them with tears on their faces. Elena stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs. She didn't know what to do. Should she bow? Should she say something? She'd never expected this reaction. She'd just played from her heart, had let everything out without thinking about how it would be received. The event coordinator rushed onto the stage, her professional smile firmly in place, though Elena could see that her eyes were red. Ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that absolutely breathtaking? Let's hear it one more time for our remarkable performer. The applause grew even louder. Elena managed an awkward bow, then hurried off stage as fast as she could without running. Once she was behind the curtain, her knees nearly gave out. The hotel manager was there and he grabbed her arm to steady her. That was incredible, he said, and his voice sounded thick. Absolutely incredible. Where did that last piece come from? I wrote it, Elena said, still trying to catch her breath. Years ago. I've never played it for anyone before. Before he could respond, people started coming backstage. The event coordinator appeared first, no longer worried about hotel reputations or disappointed guests. There are people who want to meet you, she said. Important people. Are you okay to talk to them? Elena nodded, even though she felt like she might pass out. Her borrowed dress was sticking to her back with sweat. Her hands ached. But there was also this incredible lightness in her chest. Like something heavy she'd been carrying for 5 years had finally been set down. The first person to approach her was an older man with kind eyes and silver hair. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with quiet authority. That was one of the most moving performances I've witnessed in my 30 years as a music critic, he said, shaking her hand. I've heard technical perfection many times, What you did out there was something else entirely. That was truth. Thank you, Elena managed to say. Her voice sounded small and far away. I'd like to write about you if you'd allow it, he continued. The city needs to know about your talent. May I ask, where are you studying now? Which conservatory? Elena felt her cheeks flush. I'm not studying anywhere. I work here. At the hotel. I'm a server. The man's expression changed to surprise, then to something that looked almost like anger. Not at her, but at the situation. You're telling me that someone with your gift is serving drinks instead of performing? Life happens, Elena said quietly. Sometimes we don't get to choose. Before the critic could respond, another man approached. He was younger, probably in his early 40s, wearing a crisp tuxedo. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, but I had to meet you. I'm the CEO of TechCore Industries. That last piece you played, the one you wrote yourself, it reminded me of my mother. She worked 3 jobs to put me through college. She sacrificed everything for me. I haven't thought about that in years. Haven't let myself think about it. But your music brought it all back. Thank you for that. His eyes were still wet. This powerful businessman, probably worth millions, standing in front of her with tears in his eyes because of something she'd played. Elena didn't know what to say. More people came. A famous actress who said the performance had touched her more than any film she'd ever made. A doctor who said he'd been thinking about quitting medicine until tonight, until the music reminded him why he'd wanted to help people in the first place. A teacher who said she was going to tell her students about this, about how real talent comes from real life, not just from expensive schools. Through it all, Elena felt like she was floating outside her body, watching all this happen to someone else. How had she gone from serving champagne to standing here being praised by people who probably had more money in their bank accounts than she'd make in a lifetime? Rita found her way backstage and pulled Elena into a tight hug. Girl, I'm still shaking, she whispered. That was beautiful. I had no idea you could play like that. Neither did I, Elena admitted, and it was true. She'd known she was good once upon a time, but she'd never played with that kind of emotion before. She'd never let herself be that vulnerable, that honest. The event was winding down, guests starting to leave, but people kept coming up to Elena, exchanging business cards, asking if she taught lessons, wanting to know when they could hear her play again. The hotel manager stayed close by, looking proud, like he'd discovered a rare treasure. Finally, there was a brief lull. Elena found a chair and collapsed into it, overwhelmed by everything. Her phone buzzed in the pocket of her borrowed dress. A text from her father. Hope work isn't too hard tonight, mija. Don't forget to eat something. Elena stared at the message. Her father had no idea what had just happened. He was at home, probably watching TV, taking his evening medications, completely unaware that his daughter's life might have just changed forever. Or maybe it hadn't changed at all. Maybe tomorrow she'd be back in her uniform, carrying trays, and tonight would just become a beautiful memory. A moment when she got to pretend, for a little while, that she was still the person she'd once dreamed of being. But as Elena looked around at the people still lingering backstage, at the business cards now clutched in her hand, at her reflection in a nearby mirror showing a woman who looked confident and alive, she felt something stir inside her, something that felt dangerously like hope. Elena didn't sleep that night. She got home around midnight, still wearing the borrowed dress, carrying a bag full of business cards and contact information. Her father was asleep in his room, his breathing steady and peaceful. She stood in his doorway for a long moment, just watching him, thinking about how much had changed in just a few hours. She changed into her pajamas and sat on her bed, pulling out the business cards one by one. The music critic, the CEO, a woman who ran a classical music radio station, a talent agent, an arts foundation director, even a representative from the city's Philharmonic Orchestra. Each card felt like a tiny piece of possibility, but Elena was almost afraid to hope too much. She'd been disappointed before. Life had taught her that dreams were dangerous things, but when she finally closed her eyes, she could still hear the music in her head. Could still feel the way her hands had moved across those keys. Could still remember the faces in that crowd, the tears, the standing ovations. That had been real. Whatever happened next, nobody could take that moment away from her. The next morning, Elena's phone started ringing at 8 o'clock. She answered groggily, expecting it to be work asking her to cover another shift. Is this Elena? A woman's voice asked. The pianist from last night's gala? Elena sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Yes, this is her. This is she. Yes. My name is Patricia Chen. I'm the director of programming at the City Philharmonic. I was at the event last night, and I have to tell you, I haven't stopped thinking about your performance, particularly that original composition. It was stunning. Thank you, Elena said, her heart starting to race. That means a lot coming from you. I'd like to offer you an opportunity, Patricia continued. We have a community concert series featuring emerging artists. The pay isn't huge, but it's a real performance at our concert hall. Are you interested? Elena's hand was shaking so much she almost dropped the phone. Yes, absolutely yes. They talked for 20 more minutes about dates and repertoire and logistics. When Elena hung up, she had to cover her mouth to keep from screaming and waking her father. A real concert? At a real concert hall? This was actually happening, but the calls didn't stop there. Throughout the morning, her phone kept buzzing. The music critic wanted to interview her for his column. The radio station wanted her to come play live on air. A local arts academy wanted to know if she'd be interested in teaching piano to underprivileged kids. Each opportunity felt like another door opening, another path forward. When her father woke up, Elena made him breakfast and told him everything. She watched his face transform as she spoke, saw the tears gather in his eyes. Mia, he said when she finished, gripping her hand tightly, I'm so proud of you. But I'm also sorry. If it wasn't for me, you never would have had to give up Juilliard. You could have been doing this all along. Papa, don't, Elena said firmly. I made my choice. And you know what? Maybe everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. If I'd stayed at Juilliard, I would have just been another talented student. But last night I played music that came from real life, from real pain and real love. That's what people connected with. That's what made it special. Her father smiled through his tears. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best, she said, squeezing his hand back. The doorbell rang. Elena opened it to find a delivery person holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. The card read, For the pianist who reminded me why beauty matters. Thank you. It was signed by the CEO she'd spoken to after the performance. More flowers came throughout the day. Chocolates. Even a bottle of expensive champagne. Elena's tiny apartment started to look like a florist shop. Rita stopped by after her shift at the hotel, screaming when she saw everything. Girl, you're famous, Rita exclaimed. Everyone at work is talking about you. The guests from last night have been calling the hotel asking about you. And get this, the hotel manager wants to talk to you. I think he's going to offer you something. Elena met with the manager the next day. He offered her a position as the hotel's resident pianist for special events. The pay was more than she made as a server, and she'd only have to work a few events each month. It wasn't a concert career, but it was a start. It was a way to make money doing what she loved while still having time to care for her father. But the biggest surprise came a week later. Elena was practicing at home on their old keyboard when someone knocked on the door. She opened it to find the CEO from the gala standing there, looking slightly out of place in the rundown apartment building. I hope you don't mind me coming by, he said. I got your address from the hotel. I have a proposition for you. They sat in Elena's small living room and he explained. He'd been so moved by her performance that he'd spoken to his wife, and together they'd decided to create something. A scholarship fund for talented musicians who had to give up their education due to financial hardship. They wanted to call it the Elena Torres Scholarship. But that's not all, he continued. We'd like to make you the first recipient. We'll cover the cost of private lessons with some of the best teachers in the city. We'll provide a stipend so you can work less and practice more. And we'll help with your father's medical expenses. Elena couldn't speak. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face, unable to believe what she was hearing. You don't have to decide right now, he said gently. But I want you to know that watching you play reminded me of something important. My mother sacrificed everything for me, and I became successful. But somewhere along the way I forgot to pay it forward. I forgot that success means nothing if you don't use it to help others. You reminded me of that, so really I should be thanking you. After he left, Elena sat with her father and cried. Happy tears this time. Tears of relief and gratitude and disbelief that life could change so dramatically in such a short time. Over the following months, Elena's life transformed. She performed at the Philharmonic's community concert and received a standing ovation. The music critic's article about her went viral, and suddenly people across the country were talking about the waitress who'd moved a ballroom full of wealthy guests to tears. She was invited to play at other venues, other events. Slowly but surely, she was building a career. The scholarship fund grew beyond anything Elena could have imagined. Dozens of students received help to continue their music education. Elena met with each one, sharing her story, encouraging them to never give up on their dreams even when life got hard. She was able to move her father into a better apartment, one with an elevator so he didn't have to climb stairs. She bought a real piano, a beautiful upright that filled their living room with music every day. And best of all, her father's health improved with better medical care and less stress. Elena still worked at the hotel sometimes, but now as their resident pianist, not as a server. She'd see Rita and her other former co-workers, and they'd always stop to chat, to celebrate how far she'd come. She never forgot where she started, never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, to have dreams that seemed impossible. One evening, almost a year after that fateful gala, Elena was performing at a charity concert. This time she was the featured performer, the name on the posters, the artist people came specifically to hear. As she sat at the piano, she looked out at the audience and saw faces of all kinds. Rich and poor, young and old, people from every walk of life. She played her original composition, the one born from pain and sacrifice. But now when she played it, there was something new in the music. Hope, joy, gratitude. The melody was the same, but it told a different story now. It said that sometimes life breaks you down, but sometimes it also lifts you back up in ways you never expected. After the performance, a young woman approached her. She looked nervous, her clothes worn but clean. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I received the Elena Torres scholarship this year. I just wanted to say thank you. My mom got sick and I thought I'd have to quit music school. But because of you, I can keep going. You gave me my future back." Elena hugged her, remembering what it felt like to be in her shoes. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just promise me something. When you make it, when you're successful in living your dream, remember this moment. Remember what it felt like to need help. And then help someone else. That's how we change the world. One person at a time." That night, Elena went home to her father. They sat together in their living room, him in his favorite chair, her at the piano. She played for him, gentle melodies that filled the apartment with warmth. He smiled, his eyes closed, looking more peaceful than he had in years. "Play that song again," he said, "the one you wrote for me." So Elena played it. And as her fingers moved across the keys, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the dreams she'd lost and the dreams she'd found, about the night she'd walked onto a stage terrified and walked off transformed, about how sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best ones. She'd gone from being invisible to being seen, from being silenced to having a voice, from serving others to inspiring them. And it all started because she'd said yes to an opportunity when every part of her wanted to say no. Elena had learned that dreams don't really die. They just wait. They hide inside you, patient and persistent, waiting for their moment to emerge. And when that moment comes, when you finally let yourself hope again, let yourself try again, let yourself be vulnerable and honest and real, that's when magic happens. That's when the music begins. Her father opened his eyes and smiled at her. "Beautiful, mija. Just beautiful." And Elena smiled back, her hands still resting on the piano keys, knowing that he wasn't just talking about the music. He was talking about life, about resilience, about the way broken things can be made whole again. She'd started as a waitress playing piano in stolen moments. She'd ended as a musician who'd touched hearts and changed lives. But more than that, she'd remained herself. Elena, the daughter who loved her father enough to sacrifice everything.